Got a little job here we're working on. When you see this many tanks, that's a bad sign. So there's really no point in pulling a system down to 500 microns if you're just going to let your recovery tanks be whatever they are. I'm going to do a little experiment here. So I've got this valve off, and you can see I was at like 300 microns. Now I'm going to blank this off. Had some air in the ball valve. We'll go ahead and get that out. I should mention that if you're struggling to pull a vacuum, exercising these or leaving them halfway will be helpful because you get little air pockets, and then when you go to shut it, all that air just goes into your vacuum. Okay, so we're back down now, and isolated, it's not as bad. Now we'll give that a chance to stabilize. It'll probably continue to rise, but let's just see what our tank is at. Alright, so that's the reason you need to pull your tanks down. Again, there's no point in pulling a 500 micron vacuum if your tanks are not 500 microns. I've got a solenoid here that's being amazingly difficult, so I can't get it with the regular solenoid magnet. So I've got this mag switch going down, it still doesn't get it. And if I take this one, there, did you hear that click? Finally got it. It's just very, it may be bad or whatever, but I will say these mag switches are great at getting some of these solenoids that are just being a pain in the butt. I'm making an adapter here for the recovery tanks because my main adapter that I would trust to hold pressure, definitely not that one, I'm going to be using on the actual recovery. So I'm making this so I can continue to pull vacuum on those cylinders. Anyways, I got some quarter taps, and they're slightly bigger than a quarter, so I just drilled a quarter hole, and then I'm gonna hammer this down in here. Okay, I've got it down in there. It's a very tight fit, and I'm gonna take this swaging tool here and just swage that so that it seals around that plastic. Okay, it's in there so tight that I can't even turn it by hand, so that should be good enough for pulling vacuum. These caps don't really have gaskets, so I'm just using a normal water hose gasket in there. These do fit well in the caps, and they also fit well in the actual real brass adapter. Just cutting the tabs off with these flush cutters, putting a little silicone grease on it, and it slides right in there. All right, so let me go over this setup here. I've got two vacuum pumps up here, which is why I've got the field piece going. So all I'm doing is just pulling a vacuum on my entire recovery setup. So all of that. And by the way, in order to get the vacuum to go through, I had to adjust this valve until I got it sucking out that way. Just straight up was actually cutting my vacuum off. Then I'm running through this subcooler, and I'll just take a second to talk about this. This is just in an ammo box. That's 3/8 tubing, and you just make your connection. These are brazed, even though it doesn't look like it. The hose on there is just to keep it from rubbing through on the ammo box. But this thing does work really good. I've got a little trickle of water going, and I've showed this in another video, but this thing works really great for adjusting flow. All you've got to do is just change that screw like that. I'm going to adjust that flow. and that's my little subcooler. I forgot to mention here that if you want to bend the coil like this, there's all these videos on YouTube about people filling them full of salt and sand and freezing them and all that crap. You don't need to do that. If you're going to take 3/8 and you're going to bend it into a coil about this size, all you've got to do is take like a 3-inch PVC pipe. I think that's what I used on this, and just go slow. And yeah, it's a little oblong, but you can see it just turns out perfect. You're not going to have any problems with flow. If you go slow, you're also not going to have kinks or anything like that. 3/8 is just plenty easy enough to bend without doing all that extra crap. Now, I am going to bleed all of this, but I did have my micron gauge on there a little bit ago just to see where I was at, and I had a really good vacuum. But it's going to get, I'm going to bleed it as well. I just like to pull a bit of a vacuum so that the bleeding is even more effective. Now, this subcooler actually works really well, and if I'm doing a small system, I can fill it with ice. But I didn't want to get 30 pounds or more of ice up here on the roof, so we're just going to keep a constant stream of water through it, and it will definitely lower the pressure in the recovery. So this is a nice compact little subcooler you can use. Shout out to Florida Man. I think I was watching one of his videos where he had like a small condenser with a fan, and I think that would work great too. I just don't have one of those, but you know, if you're salvaging a little refrigeration unit, you might think about turning it into a subcooler. All right, let's get this hundreds and hundreds of pounds of refrigerant in tanks. Hey, what is that right there? Huh? What? Oh, anyways, we've got 85 pounds out. The water is nice and cold. I had to increase the flow. We were getting some heat. The head pressure is staying very low, but then again, I am pumping liquid. So I'll try to show this again once I get to vapor and start pushing vapor. I'll expect that to have to absorb quite a bit more heat. Got the field piece pulling the next cylinder down, and I accidentally let some air into this one, but I think these are working pretty well because we're at like 900. I think we started at like 38. Yeah, I accidentally removed the wrong cap when I had the wrong valve open. Now, even though the tear weight is sometimes stamped on these, you can see that, or always stamped on it, I should say, sometimes you can't read it. So always write down your tanks. That's the tear weight. That's what we have in it. I got the oil out of this Tez 8. Man, looks like I need to change it. Nah, it's still good. This tank here has been nothing but vapor, so let's see how the subcooler is doing. That's my system pressure. And I'm at 43 pounds. I've got the subcooler going. That water's still very cold. Of course, you can see some bubbles building up where the tubing is dumping heat into the water. Now I went ahead and set this gauge up because it's a lot more accurate than the Appion gauge, and I'll go ahead and flash up a screenshot. So as you can see, it's doing great. And it's making this recovery go a lot faster. Let's see, these are all our full tanks right now. Okay, we're at 74 pounds now, and I'm gonna throw up another screenshot. But basically this subcooler is maintaining the exact same pressure even as this tank is starting to fill up. I gotta shut everything down, and we're gonna have to continue this tomorrow. This is a real big job here. We're replacing these two compressors that shorted out, and it doesn't look like they shorted out at the same time. One of them was probably down for a while, and then the other one kicked out, and that's when they noticed it. There may be something going on with the system, but I'll have to dig into that later. Anyways, we're going to be out here for a while, doing a lot of stuff. So, you know, when you're going to be at a particular job for a while, it's a good idea to do some things to make yourself comfortable. I used to carry a canopy, but they're kind of a pain in the butt, honestly. So I've gone to just using a tarp, and this will work well as long as you're working on units that are tall like this. I tend to work on a lot of VRF stuff, and those units are also tall as well. And then as far as setting it up, I've just got this pipe strap, you know, on units or whatever. If you're on like a little wall like that, you can just, sorry, that's not in focus. You can just clamp onto that. Obviously got to be careful not to do any damage, but these cam locks work really well because you can just pull the string right through and they tighten. And I've just got one tied off over there. And this is really nice for keeping you under, you know, in the shade and out of the rain. And then we got a few fans going. My apprentice brought that one. Beyonce was giving him crap for stealing it. We need it more up here than she needs it at home, I think. That might be debatable. I also should mention that this is really, really fast to set up, unlike a canopy. So it might take you 10 minutes to get your anchor points set. But after that, you can set this tarp up in just like 30 seconds. And to take it down is just as fast. You just roll it up and stuff it in a bucket. So that's another advantage. We got oil all over this header. And there is our leak. 2 of them. It's nasty. This thing's become an outdoor air cleaner, you know.